Shavua Tov. This is Moshe Shabbat Parshat Chukar 5776. This morning, at the Young Israel of Teaneck, Rabbi Binyamin Kron mentioned one of Reb Shlomo Carlebach's favorite stories, and there's a postscript to this story which he didn't mention. So I'd like to share the story and the postscript. The stories appears in both of these books, Holy Brother and Lamed Vav, with variations. I'm going to share the version from Holy Brother. And the name of this story is one of the most famous stories from Shlomo, is YOSELE the Miser. In the 1970s, Shlomo Carlebach participated in a 3-day ecumenical conference held at a prestigious university in Boston. He was scheduled to perform his soulful melodies on the opening night of the program, but because of the extraordinary reception accorded to him, was asked to return the second and third nights as well. On all 3 nights, he was introduced by the same master of ceremonies, a prominent assistant bishop, a rising young star in the Episcopalian Church. Shlomo always interspersed his songs with Hasidic tales that illuminated a deceptively simple, yet truly profound insight into the human condition. One of his oft-repeated spiritual teachings was the gentle counsel, "You never know." Shlomo had a large repertoire of stories from which he drew, and on the first night of the program, he arbitrarily chose to tell his audience the tale of YOSELE the Miser. And this was the story that he told. Everybody knows that Krakow in the 1500s was mamish, bustling with Jewish life. It had a large and vibrant Jewish community consisting of holy rabbis, scholars, and saints. But like any other community, it also had its share of colorful characters. Among them, YOSELE the Miser, the richest man in town, but let's put it kindly, not known for his generous ways. For decades, the Yiddelach, the little Jews in town, had despaired of YOSELE's miserliness. Mamish, even in the worst of times, during famines, epidemics, and wars, when people begged him for help, he turned them away from his door empty-handed. Time passed, and one day, when YOSELE was very old and near his end, representatives of the Chevra Kadisha, the burial society, visited him at his home with one final plea for help. "During your lifetime," they rebuked him, "you did not fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah, of charity. But you still have a last chance to redeem your soul. Give us a large sum of money to distribute to the poor of the town now, and we pledge to bury you. But if you do not give proper tzedakah now, we won't give you a burial at all." "I'll bury myself before I give you money," the miser yelled, chasing the Chevra Kadisha representatives from his home. And by the way, in those days, the Chevra Kadisha, they held complete control over the cemetery. A few days later, the miser passed on from this world, and true to their word, the Chevra Kadisha let his corpse rot for days in his home. It's not a very Jewish thing to do. Finally, some anonymous soul had mercy on the miser and quietly buried him in the pauper's field. A few days later, a man comes knocking on the rabbi's door crying, "Please, Rabbi, help me. I'm unemployed and I have no money to buy food for my family." The rabbi comforts the holy brother and gives him some rubles, and the man leaves. At that time, I believe the rabbi's name was Rav Kalman. A half hour later, another man knocks on the door with the same appeal. All day long, desperate petitioners besiege the rabbi until it finally dawns on him that something very strange is going on. Suddenly, all the unemployed men in the Jewish community are descending upon him at once. Can't be a coincidence, right? So when the next holy brother comes to the rabbi asks him, "Tell me, how long have you been unemployed?" The holy brother says, 2 years. The rabbi asks, "Forgive me, I don't mean to pry, but how did you manage until now?" "Well, every Thursday night for 2 years, an envelope with money was slipped anonymously under my door. This money was enough to sustain my family for the week. I never found out who my anonymous patron was, but last week the envelopes suddenly stopped coming." Oy Gewalt. Now the Rabbi Mamish sees the light. "Tell me," he asked the man, "did you ever petition YOSELE the miser for help?" The man thinks for a minute. "You know," he says slowly, "when I first lost my job 2 years ago, I did approach YOSELE. At first he was very nice to me, asking me how much I thought I needed each week to sustain my family, and all sorts of questions about my life and where I lived. But when I told him the amount, he started screaming at me that I was crazy to think that he could afford to support me, and he chased me from his home. But come to think of it, I never put 2 and 2 together because he acted so mean to me, but the envelope started coming the very next week." The rabbi asked everyone who came to him that day for help the same questions, and always the answers were the same. They had all once gone to YOSELE for help. After inquiring how much money they needed, he had chased them from his home in a terrible rage. But the very next week, the envelopes started coming, and they stopped only with YOSELE's death. No, so it turned out that YOSELE the miser wasn't a miser after all, but a tzaddik elyon, the highest of the high, the holiest of the holy, who had practiced the loftiest form of tzedakah, matan baseter, hidden charity. The rabbi commanded the entire community to converge upon YOSELE's grave in the pauper's field and beg his forgiveness. And on the tombstone where it was written, YOSELE the miser, became YOSELE the holy miser. This was the story Shlomo arbitrarily chose to tell the first night of the program. When he walked off stage, he noticed the assistant bishop staring fixedly at him, all color drained from his face. Before Shlomo could approach him and ask him if he was ill, he was surrounded by a throng of eager admirers, and when he turned again toward the bishop, he was gone. On the second night of the program, the same assistant bishop was master of ceremonies again, but before introducing Shlomo, made an unusual request. "Please, Rabbi Carlebach, when you tell a story, could you tell the story of YOSELE the miser again?" Shlomo was taken aback. "I'll be glad to honor any request you have, but please forgive me, isn't this the exact same audience as last night? Wouldn't they rather hear a different story?" The bishop's eyes beseeched Shlomo. "I beg you to retell the story." Shlomo found the request a bit bizarre, but he shrugged his shoulders good-naturedly, and he said, "If it means that much to you, my friend, I'll be privileged to honor your request." And true to his word, Shlomo told the story over again. On the third and final night of the program, the bishop, master of ceremonies, approached Shlomo again and whispered, "Please, Rabbi Carlebach, please retell the story about YOSELE the miser." This time Shlomo lodged a gentle protest. "My holy brother," he said softly, "I want so much to honor your request, but this is the exact same audience as last night and the night before. Don't you think everyone is getting a little tired of the story of YOSELE the miser?" "Please, Rabbi Carlebach," the assistant bishop replied with an edge of desperation in his voice, "I beg you to tell the story one last time." Once again, Shlomo shrugged his shoulders in acquiescence. "Holy brother, if it means so much to you, who am I to deny you?" After the story had been told the third time, the assistant bishop approached Shlomo and said, "Let's go for a walk. I'm ready to explain." As you know, the church is my entire life. I have excellent prospects for a promising career within the church, and I am in fact considered one of the young leading lights in the church today. I was raised by devout Christians who groomed me for this life early on. I have never had any question or doubt about my true path, and my life has been smooth and untroubled. Until a few weeks ago, my beloved mother, who was dying of cancer, called me to her deathbed. "I know that my time is running out," she said, "and I cannot die in peace knowing that I have lied to you about your heritage. I have hidden this secret from you all my life, but now I must tell you the truth. You are not a Christian. You are in fact a Jew." You see, I was a concentration camp inmate, and your father, an American soldier who helped liberate the camps. But perhaps it was because I was so starved for affection, perhaps it was because my whole family had been wiped out, and I felt so alone, or perhaps it was because I was so angry at God, that I fell in love with your father. When he proposed to me, he made me promise that I would renounce my Jewish heritage and lead a Christian life. He also made me promise never to reveal the truth about my identity and to raise any children that would come along as devout Christians. I promised all these things, and all my life I faithfully kept my promise. But now, as I lay dying and finally search my soul, I know I've made a terrible mistake. I respect your father's requests, but if God ordained you that you should be born a Jew, you should be a Jew. In robbing you of your heritage and aborting God's divine plan, I've committed a grievous sin against you, against the Jewish people, against myself. Especially because you come from such an illustrious Jewish lineage. You see, we are descendants of a very famous holy man, known in Jewish lore as YOSELE the Miser. Telling you the truth is my act of repentance. It is too late for me, but it is not too late for you to return to your people and reclaim your heritage. This is my last request, my dying appeal to you. Become a Jew. Become a Jew in the tradition of YOSELE the Holy Miser. Shlomo, after she had uttered these words, my mother clutched my hand feverishly and planted upon it one last kiss, and then she died. I walked around in a daze. Not only was I trying to absorb the shock of losing my mother, but also my identity, as I had always known it. All the certainties of my life were gone. I didn't know what to do. So I did what I knew best. I prayed to God. And I said to God, give me a sign. If you want me to return to my heritage, send me a person who will publicly tell the story of YOSELE the Miser. And to prove that there is no mere coincidence, but that this is in fact providence, the person has to tell the story 3 times. This is my deal with you, God. The die is cast. That is why I begged you to repeat the story, to show me that your presence was indeed a fulfillment of the sign. So, Rabbi Karlbach, how does it feel to be God's emissary? Stunned by the story, Shlomo spent the entire night speaking with the assistant bishop, who decided that the best course of action was for him to simply disappear. His destination, he told Shlomo, would be the only logical place, Israel. He would keep in touch, he promised. 5 years later, after the fateful encounter, Shlomo received a letter from the bishop, postmarked Jerusalem. I live in Jerusalem, dressed in the Hasidic garb and long payas of my ancestors, the bishop wrote, learning Torah full-time. Tomorrow I go under the chuppah and will marry. I thought you would like to know how life turned out for the descendant of YOSELE the Miser, who crossed paths with the man who has made him immortal. So that is the postscript to the story. And just as a postscript to this, just share how Rabbi Krohn mentioned that we often appeal to God for help, and the answer doesn't come the way we want it. But that doesn't mean that God's not there and He's not helping us. YOSELE the Miser heard he wanted to have a mitzvah where nobody would hold gratitude to him, but he didn't not help. God always finds a way to help us. And even when we think He's not helping us, He's giving us exactly what we need at this time. May Hashem bless us that not only do we recognize how He helps us, but that we seek to imitate Him and seek to help others in the very best way for them. Shavua Tov.